Insidious, Out of the Further, post-credit scene. The biggest detail you missed. Warning, major spoilers. Insidious, Out of the Further has a mid-credit scene, and it gives Cyrus Lam a particularly brutal fate. After Gemma defeats him and sends him back into the Further, Cyrus is strapped into the dead dentist's chair. The demon begins drilling his teeth while other entities watch, and KeyFace ultimately closes the red door, leaving Cyrus trapped in the Further. If you walked out of Insidious Out of the Further thinking Cyrus Lam was finished, the mid-credit scene makes one thing very clear. Cyrus isn't gone. But he's also not exactly alive. And that distinction is one of the most important details in understanding how the sixth Insidious movie ends. The scene is short, but it answers a major question left hanging after Gemma's final confrontation with Cyrus. It also pays off one of the movie's most obvious horror setups, the dead dentist. What initially looks like a strange recurring monster suddenly becomes the perfect instrument for Cyrus's punishment. And there's an even bigger detail hiding in the final seconds. KeyFace locks the red door. That seemingly simple image could have major implications for the future of the Insidious universe. What happens in the mid-credit scene? The scene takes place after the main story has already ended. Gemma has defeated Cyrus. She has protected Maya. And Cyrus's plan to bring the dead out of the Further and into the real world has collapsed. But Cyrus hasn't simply disappeared. The mid-credit sequence reveals him back inside the Further. He's injured and helpless. Then something even worse happens. Cyrus is strapped into a dental chair. The chair belongs to the terrifying entity known as the dead dentist. The dentist approaches him with a large drill, and then the movie finally delivers the full dental horror sequence it had been teasing throughout the story. The dentist begins drilling into Cyrus's teeth. The scene is disturbing, but there's also a very deliberate sense of irony to it, because this isn't the first time Cyrus has been involved with the dead dentist. Earlier in the movie, Cyrus uses the entity to terrorize Gemma. Now the same creature is being turned against him. That's not an accident. It's the movie's final piece of supernatural revenge. Why is Cyrus in the dentist's chair? To understand the scene, you have to go back to Cyrus's plan. Cyrus is already dead. He's a cult leader whose obsession with death led him into the Further. But he doesn't accept being trapped there. He wants to return to the living world. More importantly, he wants to convince his followers that he can give them the same opportunity. That's why Gemma becomes so important. Gemma possesses a rare supernatural ability. She isn't merely capable of entering the Further, she can bring things from the Further into the physical world. That makes her a courier. Cyrus sees her ability as the solution to his biggest problem. He believes he can use Gemma as a bridge. If he can manipulate her ability, he can bring himself and his followers into the world of the living. And that's exactly what he attempts to do. How does Gemma stop him? Cyrus makes one critical mistake. He assumes Gemma's ability only works in the direction he needs. But Gemma eventually understands that the power works both ways. If she can bring something out of the Further, she can also send it back. So instead of continuing to fight Cyrus on his terms, Gemma reverses his entire plan. She transports the supernatural invasion back into the Further. And she does something especially dramatic. She transports the house itself into the Further. The house becomes a kind of supernatural trap. Cyrus and the entities are back where they started. But now they're stuck. The escape route Cyrus promised his followers is gone. And his followers aren't happy about it. Why do Cyrus' followers turn against him? Cyrus has spent the movie promising freedom. He tells the dead that he can help them escape. He presents himself as someone capable of defeating the boundaries between life and death. But when Gemma defeats him, his followers discover that the promise was meaningless. They're trapped in the Further again. They haven't escaped. And Cyrus hasn't delivered what he promised. So they turn on him. They attack him and tear him apart. For a moment, it looks as though Cyrus has been destroyed. But the Insidious universe doesn't treat death in a normal way. Cyrus is already a dead man. What matters is whether his spirit still exists. And the mid-credit scene answers that question. Yes, Cyrus is still there. Is Cyrus actually dead? This is where the wording gets complicated. Cyrus is technically already dead as a human being. His physical life ended before the main events of the movie. What survives is his supernatural existence inside the Further. So when his followers attack him, they don't necessarily erase his spirit. The mid-credit scene confirms that. He's still conscious, he's still capable of suffering, and he's still trapped. So the best way to describe Cyrus' fate is, he is defeated and imprisoned rather than permanently erased. That's consistent with the supernatural rules established throughout the franchise. Why is the dead dentist so important? The dead dentist might initially seem like another creepy monster designed simply to scare Gemma. But the movie deliberately connects him to Gemma's profession. Gemma is a dental hygienist. That allows the filmmakers to transform something ordinary into something terrifying. Dental equipment becomes horror equipment. A dental chair becomes a torture chamber. And the dentist becomes a grotesque reflection of Gemma's everyday world. But the character gets an additional purpose at the end. Cyrus previously weaponized the dentist against Gemma. Now Cyrus is placed in the same position. That's why the scene feels like poetic justice. The villain who thought he could manipulate supernatural entities suddenly discovers that he has no control over them at all. The creature he once used as a weapon becomes his tormentor. The biggest detail is the red door. The most important image comes toward the end of the scene. KeyFace appears. Fans of the franchise will recognize KeyFace from Insidious: The Last Key. He's associated with doors and the supernatural boundary between worlds. And in this scene, KeyFace performs a very simple action. He closes the red door. That might look like a normal franchise callback. It isn't. The red door has enormous symbolic importance in Insidious. It represents access to the Further. It's the visual boundary between the world of the living and the supernatural realm. Cyrus spends the entire movie trying to cross that boundary. He wants out. He wants to bring the dead with him. He wants Gemma to open the way. But the final image shows the exact opposite. The door closes. So, what is the biggest detail you missed in the Insidious Out of the Further post-credit scene? It's the fact that the scene isn't simply a gruesome joke about Cyrus getting his teeth drilled. It's the final reversal of his entire story. Cyrus begins the movie obsessed with escaping death. He wants to escape the Further. He wants to bring his followers into the world of the living. And he believes Gemma's courier ability can make that possible. But Gemma eventually understands her power and turns it against him. She sends Cyrus and the supernatural invasion back into the Further, trapping them there. His followers then realize that Cyrus has failed to give them the freedom he promised and turn against him. Cyrus survives that attack in supernatural form. Then the mid-credit scene reveals what happens next. He's strapped into the dead dentist's chair. That's particularly significant because Cyrus had previously used the dentist to terrorize Gemma. Now the tables have completely turned. The dead dentist becomes Cyrus's tormentor. He drills into Cyrus's teeth while other entities from the Further watch. And then comes the biggest visual clue. KeyFace closes the red door. That door represents the boundary between the Further and the world of the living. Cyrus spent the entire movie trying to open that boundary. He wanted to escape. Instead, the door is closed on him. He's trapped. And that's arguably worse than death for a character whose entire existence was built around defeating death. The scene doesn't explicitly confirm Insidious 7, and there is no direct announcement that Cyrus will return. But because his spirit continues to exist inside the Further, the filmmakers have left themselves room to bring him back if they choose. For now, though, Cyrus's story ends with him receiving the exact opposite of what he wanted. He wanted freedom. He gets imprisonment. He wanted to control the dead. The dead control him. He wanted to escape the further. The further becomes his prison. And the dead dentist becomes the final reminder that the villain who spent the entire movie terrorizing Gemma has ultimately become the victim of his own supernatural world. That's why the red door matters so much. It isn't just a callback to the earlier Insidious movies. It is the final visual statement of Cyrus's fate. The door is shut. Cyrus is